James Hewitt?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, so we don't have this on the agenda, but can we just go ahead and just do the Pledge of Allegiance now? The flag's up here right in front of us, so I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 4, Superintendent report. Back to school plan. Motion to approve Mr. Saunders' back to school plan.
Well, first I want to thank all those that have been contributing. A lot of long hours have gone into meeting the state mandates for crafting a back to school plan. What I'm about to share with you today is not totally comprehensive of our back to school plans. It's what the state has asked us to do. We have gone above and beyond that, looking at some other formats that some other districts did. We go deep into a lot of areas like professional development and other things that the state didn't request that we show with them today. So those things out there in our back to school plan, but as we move it forward for the community to show those facets, they're going to be really important for them. So again, the community, the committee that's been a part of it, received hundreds and hundreds of emails from folks, and everything that we've been trying to do is to craft a plan to meet the needs of our students and those families, and providing options for those people. And that's what you'll see today when we go through this process. So this is our back to school, an overview of our back to school plan. Those online options are a big piece of this is our partnership with our teachers, and you have a piece in here that would require us to pay some MAEA stipends. What the budget looks like related to COVID right now, I know that continues to come up meeting after meeting. The budget as far as COVID related continues to kind of blow up to a certain degree, but these are necessary in order to protect the health and safety of our staff and students as we move forward. So to me, that's one of those areas where this is where we're going to have to spend more money and continue to spend more money. I can't give you what that end game looks like. Is we get more data every day. We come across our students and our staff. So, but I'll touch on that for us today. The district. Probably, been a large portion of the time is really working on what those online options are. And through a lot of parent interaction, parent emails, talking to a lot of folks in the community, the majority of everything I've heard is that our community wants a connection to Marquette Area Public Schools teachers. I had thrown out there very early on that maybe a partnership with Edgenuity or even Michigan Virtual, in the sense of how students had previously taken Michigan Virtual classes, which is through a teacher outside our district. Again, the vast majority of all the emails I got were, we're looking to go online for those people that are, and I'll share that number with you shortly. But for those people that want to be online, they don't view this as necessarily a permanent move for their family. This is a temporary move. We want to be connected with the district. In thinking through that, the flexibility that we want to have as a district going into this, if we're going to offer face-to-face education, we want that education to be seamless. And we want folks to be able to be online and potentially come back to us, whether that be after a month or 9 weeks, or depending on what the decision is that's driving that, health, safety, waiting for a vaccine, whatever that is, a lot of families are anticipate coming back at some point. So we want those online students to be in the same place as the students that are face-to-face. I think the other piece to really note that I want to hone in on when we talk about these virtual options in dealing with the potential for coronavirus. So I've had weekly meetings with the health department. Dr. Piggott pointed it out last week in our meeting. Symptoms for coronavirus and the cold are almost identical. And the average student has 4 to 6 colds a year. So we already are dealing with that. If we really want families to feel safe, and yes, I can keep my kids home now for a few days or longer because they have cold and or corona type symptoms because they're almost identical, then we want them to feel comfortable that it's okay to go online. If I need to stay out for 5 days or 10 days, then I can go online. I'll be in the same place that those students are face to face, and I don't have to feel like I'm going to be missing out on anything. And then I can feel comfortable coming back after that period of either having a doctor sign off or they're not showing symptoms, or if they really were for that quarantine period. So our online options would be for some students to be 100% virtual, and some families will choose to potentially be 100% virtual. Some families could choose a combination. So we've all heard a lot of folks, and I haven't heard a lot, but I've heard a small number of folks that are looking for some type of hybrid option. Maybe I come to school daily for my core classes, and then I'm limiting my exposure at school. I'm here for math, science, language arts. Maybe I'm taking my other classes, electives, or even a core class online every day. So that could be an option, especially as we build this seamless model for online learning. We also, as I was sharing with Mr. Rossway this morning, I got an email from a parent a couple weeks ago. Well, they're a split family. Well, they're at dad's, they want to come for face-to-face instruction that week, and when they're at mom's, she wants to keep them home, and so online. So that's another version of a hybrid that a family could choose. I'm going to be here every other week. We could have folks that could actually choose maybe a couple days a week. So we actually are probably one of the few districts that would say you don't have to be 100% virtual. We'll allow some form of hybrid options for our parents and for our students. And of course, the last option, the and certainly attending in person and trying to come up with a model that could be sustainable that we could offer in person for, again, about 5 days a week. So I have a description. I don't know if it's important to go through this for the board today. I put this out so you guys could take a look, but I guess I'll click on at least one of these options so we can show this for the public. And this would be for like a JK through 5. Our JK through 5 virtual academy will provide a rigorous, robust online learning for students in junior kindergarten through 5th grade. Unlike this past spring when the state of Michigan did not mandate students attend online learning and districts were forbidden from granting credit or grades, the state is now requiring compulsory attendance for 180 days. MAPS will be issuing credit and grade achievement for satisfactory completion of online programs. Teachers will track student participation, monitor student wellness, grade assignments, homework, and quizzes, provide feedback on student work, differentiate instruction, communicate through virtual platforms, use report cards at all levels 2 times per year for online students. Those virtual classes, again, going to be taught by our MAPS teachers. Students will receive that instruction. Teachers are going to get some specialized training in online learning to ensure all students maximize their education and growth and progress. We'll be using Blooms as the messaging platform. Many of you are familiar with either Blooms or Remind. Those are the texts that teachers send out to help communicate with parents. JK through 2nd grade will be using Seesaw as the educational platform. And then 2nd through 5th grade, Google Classroom. That would be where they would push out instructional videos, homework assignments, test quizzes, those types of things. Each student's going to be assigned a virtual classroom and teachers, much like they would face-to-face. If you're in a scheduled right now in a 5th grade classroom, that 5th grade teacher is going to end up being your online teacher. Again, as I said, through Google Classroom, Seesaw, MobiMax, and some other platforms. Our virtual classrooms will follow the same scope and sequence as face-to-face, and we'll follow the Common Core state standards. And then we get into the flexibility, which I just talked about a little bit. Students will have some individualized learning opportunities. We will provide paper packs. There are still pockets in our community where it doesn't really matter. We can't provide, they live in a place where they can't get internet access. Either it's not provided through a charter or something like that, or even what we use through Northern with the WiMAX. That just doesn't work at their house. So we were going to have to provide paper packets for those families that need those. We'll put hotspots in all our buildings again for drive-up internet access for folks as well. There's text-to-speech for students, additional time to complete assignments, a variety of those communication options, phone calls, emails, messaging within the online system, some virtual meeting time with teachers. We'll continue to update, monitor those IEPs, 504 plans, those types of things, and provide some administrative support. Every student will be issued a Chromebook and materials to be successful. We will use our tech department to support those students, parents, and guardians. And again, as a whole, this allows us to students and families to remain connected to the MAP school system. Those that are online can still participate in extracurricular activities, and certainly we'll have some online. That write-up for our 6th through 8th grade, our Marquette Senior High School students, and also our Marquette Alternative High School students. So to make that happen, I've been working with the union. There's going to be some pretty extensive work, I think, for our teachers above and beyond what their normal contract would call for in order to make this relationship happen. So I've been negotiating a stipend for our teachers, working with our union presidents. And I have to say, you know, Rachel and Yvonne have been outstanding to work with. They see the big picture. They know where we've had some pitfalls and some other things, and have really worked with the district to try to make this work for all families. Everybody at the table understands the importance of providing a multitude of different options, educational options for families. So I do want to praise them and their willingness to work with us and make this happen. So the estimated cost of those stipends, about $525,000. It will be wage and retirement reportable compensation. So the next question, one of the biggest questions that I think I've had from the board is what does these COVID expenses look like? And we'll start going through. Deb, do you want to maybe tackle a few of those, especially from the budgeting standpoint? I can talk about some of the individual items, but you can talk a little bit about the funding sources and what some of that looks like.
Sure. The funding sources that we see posted up here in the PowerPoint include 3 different grant areas. One was the ESSER grant, which we received in fiscal year 20 and have spent the $236,000 of it. There's a little bit carried over, and that we share in portion with Father Marquette because we are a proportionate share district and they receive their share of those federal funds. The other one is the 1032, that's Corona Relief Fund. And there's 39,000, but that's pushed into fiscal year 21. It did not come to be available within fiscal year 20. And that is very restricted to COVID expenses only. The 11P CRF funds just appeared on our August state aid. That is $350 per pupil, restricted for coronavirus expenses, but is offset by $175 per pupil proration. That proration that we talked about did appear on our August state aid. So the net effect is $175 per pupil, which is $566,075.
You're okay.
We've had some feedback. So those are the grant budgets and sources of funding that we have for both of these fiscal years. We're at about the 1.2, just shy of 1.2 going into fiscal year 21. So when we look at the detail by item in the next slide,
That's my cue.
you can see where those are spent in detail, and I'll turn that back over to Mr. Saunders.
So we start looking at a lot of the big issues that we've been purchasing as we go through this process. Looking at some salary benefits, subs and contracted services. Certainly when we throw things in there like the stipend, that becomes a pretty large dollar amount of what that's going to look like, but that's necessary in order to have the staffing and also to have our staff teach those online programs. Some of the other big expenses, PPE. We ordered just 40,000 disposable masks alone to make sure we had about 200 in every classroom to start the year. We've ordered things like clear masks. I'm probably not explaining that right. Our regular cloth mask with a clear shield, so especially our students like are hearing impaired or need to read lips. So we have those for every one of our teachers to be able to use. Those are reusable masks. I think we purchased 500 of those to start with. Maybe a bus driver, anybody that might need that. An instructional program aide working with a student, they need to see, again, those facial expressions and things from our teachers. Things like hand sanitizer. I know we had 109 gallons that we had in just one shipment alone of hand sanitizer. Electrostatic sanitizing. I think we purchased, 12 electrostatic sanitizing machines for buses, for classrooms. This would be done at the end of the school day. It's an instant clean. We're still able to use our green cleaning materials, but it somehow electrifies it. It's a quick mist. It's an instant dry, instant kill. And it's like the on-a-wand system. So you're going to come through desks, rooms are going to be barren, or you're not going to be able to leave books and things like that out. It's going to be pretty white as far as it comes for the rooms without, even posters, things like that, is we have to be able to come through, get the walls where kids could be touching, things like that. So we've made some of those purchases. And again, we just gave you a snapshot.
What was the cost picture of an all online option?
Cost picture of an all online option?
What would our incremental costs look like, and what would our budget impact look like?
Well, we wouldn't have needed any of the PPE if it came down to an all online option.
Did we have an overall analysis of all online?
We would not need probably wouldn't need the stipends for our teachers on an all online option.
Busing so was there an analysis done of an all online option?
No, I can honestly say we didn't do an analysis of an all
But
online.
we also wouldn't get the grant money that goes along with that if we weren't having the offset costs, would we?
We need to have the restricted costs here, but we also need to look at appropriate staffing. If you go with all online, do you need all the staff? So there would be layoffs in phase 4 and 5 because there's no restriction to retain staff under the governor's plans in phase 4 and 5. So layoffs could occur. You hit phase 1, 2, and 3 where online is mandated. We are mandated then to pay everybody.
On the question which you just said, I was thinking about that. If we did it all online, the stipends wouldn't be necessary. What if we get to a month into it and have to go all online? I mean, are the stipends gone?
Once we commit to that, we're committing to that. I mean, our teachers are gonna start working now to make sure that the online option is robust and rigorous for our kids. And to that question, Mr. Randall, even if we went online in a month, doesn't mean that at some point in time, we're not allowed to come back for face-to-face either.
Right.
So dealing with prorations and things like that, I think this is just a one-shot deal as far as that goes. So again, a lot of items on here, disinfectant wipes. We ordered thousands of packages of disinfectant wipes. The list goes on and on. A lot of this PPE is certainly already been purchased by the district. This is not part of the state requirement. The district response plan, the tiered response plan. This is something that we came together with last February in anticipation of coronavirus coming to the UP potentially at that point. You know, when we think about the mindset of where districts were last February, March, from coronavirus or COVID-19 being introduced to the United States in maybe November, December, January, as things started to pick up, we needed to sit down and develop our own district response plan. Looks completely different now than what it looked last February or March. And I'll just click on this real quick. And outlining some tiers. We stayed with the 4-tier approach. Tier 4, face-to-face instruction, occurring in phase 4 or 5 within the governor's plans. Virus outbreak is detected in our community. We already have the virus in our community. So this is where we're at right now in tier 4. And how we would be moving forward. We would be restricting all access to our buildings, only allowing students, staff, qualified visitors, complying with the MHSAA and MAPS athletic plan for all athletic activities, using containment stations for any sick student in our school buildings, requesting medical clearance or 14-day quarantine for symptomatic individuals, suspending all activities that are a gathering of the community, graduation, spring concerts, scholarship nights, things like Kaufman Awards, field trips, etc. Daily sanitizing program of all our occupied spaces, masks required to be worn by staff and students, and social distancing to the greatest extent possible. Tier 3, face-to-face instruction, phase 4 and 5 within the governor's plans. A virus is detected within the school system. Students or staff below a certain percentage threshold. District actions, following all tier 1 guidelines, coordinate with the Marquette County Health Department for assistance with contact tracing and general guidance, notify students and staff of positive COVID-19 case, encourage COVID-19 testing of students and staff where appropriate. Face-to-face instruction continues.
That should be tier 2.
Yeah,
We switched to tiers.
we did. A little typo there that we'll have to get. Tier 2. Moving up further, phase 4 and 5 within the governor's plans, recommendation from the Marquette County Health Department or the local health system. Again, this is a movement to online learning, suspending face-to-face activities. In-person instruction within the district falls below 75% attendance. In the past, we would have had to just cancel school if we weren't meeting 75% attendance. District isn't compensated if we don't hit 75% attendance, so we moved to all online learning. And then looking at a percentage of our population, any combination of staff and students confirmed with a positive COVID-19 test, various movements to online instruction or suspension of activities could occur. So
That percentage, do we have that?
we don't. So here's a good talking point. We've had that discussion as a committee 2 weeks in a row. And let me back up before I even get to the committee. So the committee asked me to propose that to our health experts. Speaking of health experts, I have Dr. Dar joining us at 9:30 for any questions that we may have. So, Linda, do we have a communication tool with Ellie when he logs on to Zoom to bring him? He's operating his practice today, and so he had a short window that he would be able to answer questions for the board. I just want to make sure I don't miss him.
It's 9:30 now.
Yeah.
So are we still working on filling in these percentages, and is this somewhat addressed by what Jim had mentioned in your email the other day, these thresholds?
Yeah, so where I was going to go or finish up with, so I had to discuss with the Marquette County Health Department. Can you give me a number? Is there any source of data that says that at a certain number we should be not conducting in-classroom activities, or we should be closing a school, or we should be closing a district? There are no guidelines. They will not provide guidelines of what that number is. That is going to be 100% a district decision. We all know that at any point in time, the governor could move us back to phases 1, 2, or 3. But in phase 4 or 5, there is no recommendation, even if you have an outbreak within your buildings or you have sporadic numbers of COVID cases, to say you need to close a classroom, close a building, close the district. So we've had this conversation twice as a committee. We've surveyed the committee for responses, and we have not been able to come up with a consensus as a committee. And I think when we break it down and we start looking at numbers, and maybe it's on me, maybe trying to put a percentage on this. I know Mr. Glendon was looking at that. What are the thresholds? How are we going to communicate that to the community? And that's where we've really struggled, because when we try to put a number on it, and here's what I think Dr. Dar will tell us today when he logs in, and what the health department will tell us. Every case is different. Every situation is different. You could have a kid come to school fully masked, socially distant, that once they do their contact tracing and figure things out, that the chance of the spread in the school, in the building, was very, very slight, if at all, perhaps. So they wouldn't recommend, even to those other kids, to necessarily be tested or to be quarantined at that point. A lot of it depends on what those interactions are to make that determination. So it could come in for 2 hours, show a symptom, be gone, or find out that he was in school for a day, mom and dad kept him home, turn around and get him tested. Maybe nobody else in that classroom shows any symptoms or ends up being positive. So putting a number on those things has proven to be very difficult. When we broke it down and looked at numbers, I'm guessing, and this is just a far out guess at this point, that our classes will probably maybe be about 20 when we come back. In a lot of instances, some might be a little more. Maybe we'll have a couple classes, 21, 22. This is a good time, maybe I should share the number. To this point, we have 270 parents that have shown interest in online learning. So 10% of our population at this point. So I'm not saying that number isn't going to go up, because I haven't given everybody a deadline of now is when we need to know. I intend to do that a week from today, August 19th. We'll have a Google form that'll go out hopefully later today, if that's the track we go, and they'll be able to respond and say, yeah, I want some form of online learning. I'm either going to hybrid or I'm going to be 100% virtual. And then that will allow us to start to build those cohorts and know what those class sizes are going to look like, what our classroom numbers are going to look like. But let's say we have 20, any percentage less than 10 means one student in a classroom, you shut down the classroom. Even in most of our sports teams, at any percentage less than 10, one student would shut down the sports team. I think one of the things we've struggled with is one student doesn't necessarily mean that we've had transmission or other students necessarily in jeopardy. And I'm not trying to downplay that, because maybe it does mean that. We just don't know at this point. So it's really hard to put a number on that. I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready for the meeting and thinking about some of the conversations we were going to have, maybe it even shouldn't be a percentage based. Maybe it should be how many classrooms do I close in a school before I then say the building's going to be closed or the district's going to be closed. Because the other thing that we're flirting with is that 75% attendance. And outside of any control we have, we could have one case and we could have that fear go through a building. And we could have parents say, okay, well, there's one case, you notified us, I'm going to keep my kid home. If that happens and we don't hit 75% attendance, there's no point for us to have schools then at that point. That would move us to online for a certain amount of time until we know that we're going to get 75% attendance back. So just another way to look at it. If you took a building like, let's just say a Sandy Knoll, maybe they have 20 classrooms. You know, if you end up having to shut down 4 or 5 classrooms, you're not going to hit 75% attendance, because that'd be 25% of the total classrooms that you have in that building anyway. So maybe it shouldn't be a percentage, maybe it should be the number of classrooms. Ultimately, though, we would have to maybe come up with some way to identify what it would look like in a classroom before you close that classroom down. So this is an issue we've struggled with. This isn't part of the state. This is us taking a step further beyond what the state requirements are, maybe beyond what our regional partners are doing to try to communicate and be transparent with our community of what that looks like and where MAPS is prepared to draw the line.
Can I make an announcement? We did, with having technical difficulties on our Zoom meeting, the password change that people had before, we have announced the new password on the website. The link is still right, but you may have to give a password in joining this meeting, and that may have happened with our guest that's coming on. Please use the word password when trying to join the meeting. The link is the same. Please use the word password as the password.
So Mr. Saunders, when you talk about the 75% threshold, is that for in-class, or how do you count online for the state?
Online is counted different. Online is really based on contacts that you have, and I think it says we have to have two-way communication at least once a week in order to count that attendance for online. A lot of what we're trying to do is still based on what I would say are outdated pupil counting rules by the state. I had a conversation with Sarah Conbenzi the other day. She had me in a conference call with Wayne Schmidt, and she said, hey, Bill, you've been telling me this, to put you in touch with a guy that could make some of these decisions. So we had a long conversation. I said, hey, these pupil accounting manuals have to be updated. We have to have more flexibility. Again, I don't know legislatively if we are, but the pupil accounting manual is written for what I would say is previous years and how we count a student, in school. So if you elect to be face-to-face, now all of a sudden you're part of that 75%. And so that whether I'm here, not here, that's where the area, am I an online student? Am I a face-to-face student? This whole blended learning model is not covered well in the state pupil accounting manual at this time. Let me say it that way is the best way to say that. So I'm hoping legislatively that they address some of those issues. Not to get off track because this isn't part of the presentation, but a few of the other things that I really wanted the state to consider is even how they count pupil contact time within a school. If we're going to social distance, if we're going to have limits on how many kids can use a bathroom at a time, if we're going to try to provide mass breaks, if we need to wipe down desks between classes, we're going to need some leeway in what those pupil accounting rules state. Right now, you can only count 30 minutes of passing time. So if the high school stays on a schedule where I'm going to change every class period, even if we cohort and we change every class period, and I'm wiping down a desk, I need more than 5 minutes probably to wipe those desks down. students, our students, are gonna need more than 5 minutes to use the bathroom if I can only have 3 or 4 people in a gang bathroom, where typically we might have 12 or 15 kids in a gang bathroom. So you may have kids lined up waiting to get in, this kid leaves, now I can go in. So thinking about all those types of things, yes, I you know, that was one of my things, is to ask for some leniency and some updates in that pupil accounting manual. I also asked them to forgo our state testing this year. I think that probably wasn't a big hit either, is we have kids in online and hybrid and face-to-face, and kids are all over the place, plus, you know, the kids that participate in the spring and a lot of kids that didn't. I said, what are you really going to get out of the state testing data at this point? We'll still continue to use our own assessments, NWEA and other tests that are going to inform the teacher of where students are and where they need to be. But I didn't feel like, you know, the M-STEP and those testings were a good expenditure of state funds, but that was my own 2 cents. Back to the last piece of the plan, that tier 1 district closure movement to online learning. It's going to happen through phase 1, 2, or 3 of the governor's plans. If at any point in time Marquette County Health Department or our local health system said cases are escalating in the area, or we don't have maybe the capacity in the hospital to have more cases, obviously we're going to be extremely reactive to that, and we would close our building down if they came to us and said, hey, this is the best thing for you right now. A spread within the district of maybe a sustained threshold for a significant time period. The other one I threw in there for consideration was maybe more than one movement to online. So if I started the year and I got 2 weeks in and I went online and we took 14 days off to allow for the quarantine period and eliminate the spread, and then we came back and we were back to school for 10 days and we had to go online again. Now we've had 2 district level movements. Now that shows me that this roller coaster, it would be easier for parents just to say, you know what, we're going to be online for the rest of the semester, instead of jumping back in, back out. At that point, we would go online. So that's something else that we put in tier 1 for district closure and movement to online learning.
Well, was there anything that, I mean, I'm struggling a little bit right now when we know that the trend right now in our community is upward. We know that there's a likelihood that we haven't yet seen all of the impacts of the tourist season. We know that there's a likelihood that less sunshine of the day, lower ventilation, and higher density of the population all will combine with the regular cold and flu season to make things really, really challenging. All of that seems to point to a very high likelihood that we get shut down anyway at some point. And I'm, as a board member and a parent, I'm struggling to make the right fiduciary decision for our community, of our district, when I don't know what the all online plan would look like financially, or from a standpoint of the rest of the district implications. It doesn't seem like we've done an analysis of an all online district call. Recognizing it's important to have our kids in school and face to face, and get it. Recognize that the vast majority of the community wants that. I would like to see that as a safe thing as well. And at the same time, I have some real concerns about whether or not we are positioning ourselves to maybe shoot ourselves in the foot as a community. We've enjoyed a low number up here. We've enjoyed a relatively isolated situation. And are we taking a gamble here with our children and our community and our teachers to get shut down in a few weeks and have to figure it out and scramble anyway? And I know this is a very hard process, and I know a lot of great work has gone into it, but what I'm not seeing is, what does that picture look like? I can't evaluate it. So can you help me understand what was done to evaluate an all online, and what risk assessment was done to compare the risks of our children maybe not having face-to-face for a while against the potential risks that we face if we do this?
But if you can't put numbers on it, how can you do that?
Well, we can't put numbers on anything in this situation, but what you can do is you can make some assumptions, right? You can say, well, if we do all online, it will mean we don't have to spend these things. If we do all online and we have a, some kind of a hybrid extracurricular where kids can come into the gym in sections and be socially distanced and dance around and see each other, but in a safe way and still get to face-to-face. If we did some consideration, then as a board member, I can look at that and go, well, what am I comparing against? But right now, I don't feel as though we're comparing against anything. I feel as though we're being given a decision without enough data to make a decision, right?
I think we're acting within the state guidelines as well.
Well, absolutely, we're acting within state guidelines, but we also have a duty to, as you pointed out and as the CDC points out, to make our own community decision.
So Bill, how many school choice kids do we have?
400.
So how many of those do you think if we decided to go 100% online and other schools remained open, what percentage of those would we lose?
It's one of those things that would be a guess at this point. I would say not only would you lose 400, but you might lose beyond that 400. You're going to lose some kids that parents need and want because of jobs and other things, face-to-face education. So it's not just the school of choice kids. We're going to have kids within our community that are going to choose another option. They're going to choose North Star. They're going to choose Father Marquette. They're going to choose Nagani, Nice, Gwynn, Ishpeming, if they're offering 5 days a week face-to-face or not. And so one of the things I think that comes into play is we worked together as regional superintendents to say, we're not going to come up with a completely different system and have these kids make a choice like, I'm going to go no masks and try to attract all the kids that want to come to school with no masks. Or I'm going to do a hybrid schedule and try to attract those kids. Well, I'm going to do a face-to-face. We've been meeting weekly all summer long, and we've done whatever we can as regional school districts to try to stay on that same page. So we don't have this mass migration of kids making that choice from one district.
We've already said that some of the kids don't have internet access as it is. So going online, that's going to create a deficit if we went 100% online. There's a learning gap already with some of our kids from higher end to lower end as it is. That would probably be exacerbated if we went 100%. I'm not saying that we won't.
Those are all good points, Mr. Cherry and Dr. Cherry. The thing that I'm concerned with is that that analysis hasn't been done. I have nothing to compare it against. I'm being told, basically, we are being told we're going back to school.
But we haven't. I mean, that's
kind of what it feels like, though, is my point. So I'm just wondering how do we make this decision, this very difficult decision with data that we're looking at? How many kids don't have access? How many kids might come to our district from other districts like they're happening in Lansing and in Grand Rapids and in Traverse City because they're going all online? How many, and what were the considerations that we gave to an all online curriculum schedule? And I didn't see that in the material. So I'm just wondering, how do we make that decision? And what was done to consider those?
How would you pick?
Well, and I guess if I could just real quick, what we've tried to do is come up with a system that allows for parent choice to be able to make that decision. Here's 100% virtual for those parents that want it.
Sure.
Here's a hybrid for those parents that want that. Here's a face-to-face for those parents that want that.
Yeah.
So we're not forcing anybody to come back face-to-face. That's the parents are making that decision.
I understand. I get
Yeah.
that. And I don't mean to imply we're
No.
forcing it. I feel as though I'm not seeing.
I just didn't want you to think that was,
No, I totally understand and respect your position. Like I said earlier.
So math-wise, if we took off, so last spring we were 100% online, right? Our costs at that point in time, although the state said you need to pay all your employees, was the budget that you approved in June 30th. We paid all our teachers, we paid our aides, we paid our bus drivers. Moving forward, there is no provision for that in a phase 4 or 5. We would have to make the decision, are we going to lay those people off or are we going to keep them? At a minimum, though, you're going to keep 100% of your teaching staff because they're going to be your online teachers if you're 100% online. So that part of the budget doesn't change. The part of the budget that changes is I've already spent the money. But maybe I can send some of that stuff back for a refund if that's where the vote goes and see how much money I can get back. Some of those things we haven't opened yet. Take off the COVID related expenses. I really couldn't tell you how many students to Dr. Cherry's point, how many are gonna go to another district?
Right, and it's all of that sort of work is an exercise in assumptions, I
Yep.
understand that. But I guess what I'm getting at is, it sounds to me that the conclusion I can draw is we didn't do a robust analysis of an online only option. We don't have a clear way to know when we as a district will make a decision to go all online, apart from being told by the health department or being told by the governor that we shut down. Are those two statements accurate?
I think we're close to answers. We've had 2 meetings now, and we've had a hard time grappling on that issue. On percentage, classrooms, again, it's all about your perspective and how you break down those numbers. And so I fully anticipate we would have that tiered response plan in place by September 8th to be able to answer those questions. We put people around a table, we have those discussions, we involve our constituents, and we'll put some numbers to that, absolutely. I think we have to be transparent with that.
Do we know at this stage how many of our students or staff are at elevated risk for COVID complications due to underlying conditions and pre-existing conditions?
I think I'd have to be voluntary
Well, if we know
information.
that.
I'm just wondering if we know. We don't know.
We know what people have approached us with concerns.
Again, most of those parents are the ones that are, or some of those parents are the ones that are on the online list, right? Hey, I'm at an elevated risk, I'm gonna stay home online. Or I have a family member in the house at risk, it's important for me to keep my child home and stay online.
Yeah, I don't believe we have the right to go and seek that information if they approach us.
And my son is a type 1 diabetic. He is at an elevated risk if he were to get COVID.
Sure.
He will be going face to face because he's also not an online learner. And, you know, I've talked to his doctors and they said that he should be fine to go back to school. That, you know, it shouldn't be the deciding factor because he's diabetic, whether he goes back to school or not.
Shouldn't be a deciding factor probably. I just wondered if we knew how many of those people are in our school district so that we as a board are making a decision based on knowledge of
How
We're
would,
not
how
making the
risky,
decision.
how risky
We're-
we are.
how would we get that information?
But they're allowed to do online if they want to. So we're not forcing a bunch of diabetics or immune compromised people to go to school
Sure.
if they don't feel comfortable. That's up to the student and the parents to decide. We're not deciding that. We're not forcing everyone to go back to school. They have the choice.
Yeah, I think big picture, I know the desire to try to get detail, right? Because everybody wants to have detail, but I think the biggest takeaway anybody has collectively has to come away with throughout this entire process is that we don't have clear data on a lot of this stuff. So I mean, we're trying to put together, and I think a lot of work went in behind the plan to come up with the most flexible options possible. And we don't necessarily have to do a rigorous analysis of what do we do online versus in person, because a lot of that can be mandated. And again, I think to your point, we collectively should come up with, and we intend to come up with some parameters, but that's why this discussion is needed, right? It's only been done maybe, with superintendent levels, and it was done at the committee level, and numbers have been thrown out, but there haven't been a consensus yet on what do we put on the numbers for a classroom, for a building, for the district as a whole. Because again, I think you have a lot of variance of opinion on this entire topic. So I'm not sure, I understand again the desire to have those numbers, but I don't know what good it would do for us to make this decision. I think, again, we provide the flexibility to our stakeholders, of the students, of the community members. If you're fearful because we don't have that clear data that you want and are desiring from all facets of life, then just out of precaution, you take the online option, and you take that extra measure of precaution. The ones who are more comfortable without having all of the data to take that calculated risk, again, whether the calculations are there or not, then you choose, and you can go back and forth. So again, I think we've done exactly what
I understand and
is
appreciate that, Mr. Hewitt. It's just that as an individual, we take that calculated risk. As a board, we are taking a risk and making decisions
But we give
on behalf
options.
of the community.
That's
So
right, we
I'm
give
just
options.
wondering, I understand, just wondering what data we used and what we did.
Here's the interesting thing about data, it's kind of funny, I was watching online the other day when Northern announced, you know, they had 900 results back, they had 5 positive cases. The responses online were polar opposites. Only 5 cases, great, let's open everything back up. Another group was 5 cases, oh my God, let's shut everything down. So a lot of this is gonna go looking at the exact same data. Individuals' interpretation of that data is going to be biased by what their feelings are overall towards the virus and what fear level they have. So we can all look at a set of data and come up with completely different analysis of what we think that data is saying based on our predisposition for where we are on this issue. So I think that's a tough one. I also don't want to put out the notion that we don't think there's going to be any cases at all. We know there's going to be cases that come up. I mean, I really think the public needs to understand, we're not saying there won't be some risk involved or potential risk, just even moving around, transportation, people coming back from vacations. We've had parents were in this week bringing kids back to Northern. We're testing everybody at Northern. So you're going to see an increase in cases. So yeah, I don't want to put that out there that we don't think that there will be a larger population increase. Whether that takes place here at the schools, Bill's trying to point out, are those transmissions taking place here? We won't know until after the fact, unfortunately. Or even then it'll be something.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things where if we do go all online, we will never know.
Yep.
We will never know. And if we don't offer that option, or we take an action that perhaps introduces a heightened risk, we won't necessarily know what action that was.
Yep.
So we're flying blind. I understand that. I just, again, I don't see the evidence that we have fully evaluated to do a risk reward analysis apart from public voting and opinion that 80% of our people want to go send their students back, because it's important to consider. Apart from that, I don't understand what decision criteria I have in front of me to weigh an all online versus a non-all online.
I do have a data point for you, and again, I don't deal with the student side, so if students are approaching us, we have 270 that have gone for the online option, and maybe that falls into the category of what you're seeking for at risk. We have had 2 staff members approach, one who is self-concerned and one who is concerned for a family member that may have immunocompromised situations. 2 out of 400 is really a 0.5%. So that's what we have as far as what we're running with staff that have notified us. So that's a pretty low percentage of people in that risk category from an employer to employee standpoint.
Dr. Darzan?
Yeah, this is Dr. Dar.
You guys have some questions for Dr. Dar, so can we invite him in then?
We already did.
He's on.
Do I have to click off my PowerPoint to make him?
Yeah, you're gonna switch over and I'm gonna unmute these TVs. Our audio will, from this room, will be coming through your computer. And I will slide all of our mics down so that we don't get that feedback.
So that's still my computer screen. Do I have to?
Yeah, Ellie said, you're in the Zoom meeting, correct?
Well, I assume since it's on there, I just closed the window for the PowerPoint.
You need to figure out how to get your.
I don't see your Zoom icon, but so that's, I'm not sure that you are.
We need to have our superintendent take a technology course.
I can Zoom just fine. Zooming and the PowerPoint at the same time seems to be.
into that Zoom meeting.
Okay, so Bill, I thought he had to on his computer already.
I'm not seeing it up because there's no icon. Usually I can click on that.
There you go. Here, you go.
And then he has to make sure he has,
I can do this again.
For whatever reason, I think it shut you down.
so then what does he have to
Because
do?
I usually can click to that
And the
Zoom
password,
icon.
password is password.
Do you remember the password, Bill?
Dr. Dar, welcome.
Good morning. How is everybody?
We're good. Thank you for joining us. I was sharing with the board that you've been an integral part of our committee and helping us navigate some of these difficult decisions. The board's gathered this morning to really make the decision on approving our back to school plan or not, whether we're back to school face-to-face, online, or some combination thereof. So as they're going through and debating the issue, I thought if they had some health-related questions, you might be able to answer those for us.
I'm happy to do the best I can.
I guess one of my questions is if your kid was in school, would you be sending them?
So my daughter Kateri is going to be a senior this year, and we are planning on sending her. I'm comfortable with the risk of that. I get that question every day about patients, and I don't think that there's really a right or wrong answer. You know, one of the challenges we find ourselves in is we want to base that on really clear data, but this pandemic is unprecedented in the memory of any living human being on Earth. And we're trying to fit, and the last pandemic that was anything similar to it was 100 years ago, and everything about the world was different at that time. So I think making these decisions is challenging. I would base my decision to have my daughter return to school partly on the numbers we're seeing in the Upper Peninsula, which, while we have had a concerning increase in numbers, are still, as a whole, we're not doing terribly compared to a lot of places. And I think that's good. And the fact that the risk to pediatric patients, while not nothing and not something that, I mean, we certainly need to take the risk seriously for pediatric patients, and I don't want to suggest anything other than that. However, as a whole, pediatric patients uniquely to this virus are at less risk than older patients. Almost all respiratory viruses affect pediatric patients more or to the same degree as older people. This is a very unique virus in that the kids who are going to school are not at tremendous risk. Now, they may have family members or friends that are at tremendous risk, and so we have to take that piece into account as well. I think that the preparatory work that's happened and the precautions that are being put in place help to mitigate that risk. And I am comfortable at the moment saying that I'm going to send my daughter to school.
So Dr. Dar, could you elaborate a little bit on the, you mentioned there's a concerning increase in the UP, and I'm aware also here in Marquette County, but that it was not qualitatively terribly bad. At what point can you talk to us about how you, from a medical perspective, would advise the district to interpret at what point we move beyond concerning and not terribly bad to concerning enough that we should take action? Or should we only hinge that decision to the local health department? Is there any circumstance in which you would advocate that we make a district-based decision?
I think that we have to rely on working together with the experts at the health department. I certainly rely on them. We are at higher risk. Really, early July was a turning point for the Upper Peninsula where we started to see more community spread. Prior to that, most of the cases we were seeing were coming in from outside of the Upper Peninsula. Now we see a lot of cases that are just explainable by community spread. And so that's been a change. Having said that, it's hard for me to say there's a really precise number where the school board should act independently of the expertise of the health department. I think that's why the health department's there. I think that's why they're looking at these numbers every day and doing contact tracing. We need to rely on our health department to be public health experts. There's been a lot of, and I think it's a side effect of the information age a little bit, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking. We all are spending, I think we're all spending a lot of time looking at numbers online and trying to come up with, boy, this makes sense or that makes sense, and this is how I'm going to make sense of this virus. And that's inevitable and I think appropriate for people to do to a certain extent. However, I think we also need to listen to the epidemiologists and the public health experts and rely on their expertise. I don't think that probably as a school board, you have that expertise independent of those voices.
Certainly we don't. So just a follow-up question then. If we see trends within the school that are different than trends in the community, do I interpret your comments then to say that, Bill, you can work with Dr. Dar and the health department to interpret those trends? We suddenly see a 2%, 3%, 5% increase in our district in positive cases, although in the community we're not seeing that same spike. In that circumstance, what would you do?
So, sorry, I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
So, I think that that would be a circumstance in which I think Bill Saunders should be calling Kevin Piggott over at the health department and talking to him about it. Certainly, I've made myself very available to talk about these things, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but I do have obviously some expertise that I think I can bring to bear. And I think those are discussions that the committee that was formed that consists of, certainly members of the public, members of the school, and I am on that committee to provide some medical expertise. That is a committee that, we have said as a committee, we want to keep meeting periodically and to be available to talk about these issues as they come up. That committee has done, I think, an excellent job of coming up with or at least approving a plan that makes a lot of sense. And that collective, I think we should continue to rely on them as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Dar? All right, well, thanks for making yourself available to us.
Thank you. And, as a parent and as a community member, I appreciate the hard work you're doing, trying to keep our kids safe. It's really important work. And I wish we had perfect data and perfect resources to go by. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. We need to be very cautious in the face of this pandemic. And I appreciate how seriously you're taking that job. So just to give you that feedback as a parent and a community member, I sure appreciate all that you guys are doing.
Thanks, Dr. Dar. So if I can elaborate on one more piece that he kind of concluded with, and that is, and what I've professed all along, Mr. Glendon and anyone else, this is a living document. This is something that whatever we do today, much like the conversation we had a week or two ago with athletics or whatever, we can come back and we can change this. We can change this at the August 24th board meeting if we feel necessary. We can change it at the end of September if we feel necessary. And we will continue to meet as a committee and again, review the data that we have and certainly make recommendations to the school board if we feel otherwise. One of the things that I'll get to a little bit later in this plan right now is we operated under the framework that the governor gave every district. Phases 1 through 3, phases 4 and 5. We pretty much took the recommendations and the strong recommendations that the state issued under phase 4, and we applied those to phase 5. So we didn't lessen our plan, even though we're in phase 5 right now. In other words, there are a lot of districts, I shouldn't say a lot. I do know there are districts that are choosing not to wear face masks. We took that on and we said, hey, these are strong recommendations under phase 4. We're applying those to phase 5. That doesn't mean that we can't come back though at a later date and be even more restrictive if we need to, and again, incorporate other things into the plan. So I just wanted to make that clear that this is a living, ongoing document that I fully anticipate both documents, the one we looked at, the tiered approach, and also our state plan, that those things are going to continue to evolve and change. As more information, more data becomes available, we need to be able to change those plans. So a quick snapshot as we go through of some things that were found in the bigger plan. Transportation, and one thing I want to point out right away is Dr. Cherry said not to make any promises. I want to strongly encourage self-transportation of students to the greatest extent possible. That would allow us to do a better job of social distancing on a bus. That would be something due next Wednesday, a week from today, August 19th, allow us to build those busing schedules, not to eliminate bus runs, but to allow us to keep the same number of bus runs and hopefully social distance if more parents choose to self-transport during this time period. Some busing changes that would also happen. All students, again, required to wear masks, assigned seating on buses so we can seat buses as cohorts. I had a case in the front of the bus and I had a kid on the back of the bus and they weren't in close proximity. That would help with contact tracing and those types of things. So again, assigned seating, families sitting together, and again, the other recommendation that we certainly adopted, everybody hand sanitizers as they get on the bus. And of course, I didn't even get into the cleaning aspects and those types of things that happen between every bus run. But those are some of the basics for transportation. Some highlights of the plan, especially we get to one of the most controversials. I talked to all the other superintendents. One of the biggest issues that they struggled with in their communities was the personal protective equipment, the facial coverings. And again, we took the strong recommendations in phase 4, applied it to phase 5. This was only a recommendation, I think, in phase 5. It wasn't strongly recommended by the state, but to wear facial coverings by all K-12 students and staff in classrooms, hallways, common spaces. Masks can be removed while eating and during breaks outdoors as long as socially distanced. Facial coverings will be worn by all K-12 students and staff on the bus. Hygiene. Each classroom will have a hygiene protocol with timelines that are posted and communicated via newsletters, web pages, bulletin boards, and the like. Include a hand washing schedule, a room and materials cleaning schedule. Every class supplied with hand sanitizer, disposable masks, disinfectant wipes, etc. Spacing, movement, and access. I think this is one where probably the only piece, this first line that differs a little bit with may be the strongly recommended in phase 4. And that's efforts will be made with no guarantee to space desks 6 feet apart in classrooms when in phase 5. If placed in phase 4, the back to school committee will meet to reevaluate social distancing recommendations for classrooms, including class size limits, if social distancing isn't attained through the attrition of students into the online offerings. So until we really know how many choose online, we won't know what our social distancing could potentially look like. But what we agreed, as long as we were in phase 5, if Mr. Hammerstrom's class only holds 20 desks 6 feet apart, that maybe they'll be 5 feet apart to get student 21, 22, 23 in there, if that's how many people still come back and want to take his class. So I want to be clear about that. Restroom sinks would be disabled and marked out of order if they're closer than 3 feet. Only bottle fill stations are going to be available for water consumption. Bubblers are not permitted to be used per the governor's executive order. Hallways, cafeterias, entries, sidewalks marked in 6-foot increments. Screening students and staff, each skill building will identify a remote and secluded room, no smaller than 100 square feet, to serve as an isolated area. This room will be outfitted with appropriate PPE, including gowns, face shields, N95 masks, gloves, sanitizing wipes, portable two-way radios, and log sheets. Each building will have an identified and trained staff person to serve as a quarantine officer. These duties will take precedent over any other responsibilities, and therefore this individual must have the flexibility to leave their regular assignment at a moment's notice. From the time of identification of potential infection, the student will not be left unattended by the quarantine officer, and a log sheet of activity will be maintained at 5-minute intervals until the student or staff member is safely removed from the building. Health department will contact the district in all positive cases to assist in contact tracing and notification of vulnerable individuals. Staff should conduct daily self-examinations, including a temperature check prior to coming to work. If they exhibit any respiratory or gastrointestinal symptoms or have a temperature of 100.4 or greater, they should stay home. Testing protocols for students and staff. Students who develop a fever or become ill with COVID-19 symptoms at school should wear a mask and be transported by their parent or guardian, emergency contact, or ambulance if clinically unstable for off-site testing. Staff who develop a fever, become ill with COVID-19 symptoms at school should wear a mask and be transported for off-site testing. Symptomatic students and staff sent home from school should be kept home until they have tested negative for COVID-19 or have been released from isolation according to CDC guidelines. And that's where that kind of relationship, that seamless transition of being able to, even if I just have symptoms, that I can easily move online and feel comfortable staying home.
I guess one of the questions I have is, if you saw the picture in Georgia of all the students just, during class change, just massive hallways filled with students and no spacing or anything else. Have you talked about that? Or
Absolutely. That becomes administrators are meeting weekly. We're having those conversations. And again, that's why I think publicly understand we're going to try to put all these measures in place. We're going to mark hallways. We're going to do those things. Ultimately, we're not going to have eyes on every student at every point in time. That's an issue. That's an issue here. This is a controlled environment for us. The control is much of our ability. We all know students break rules, staff break rules, I break rules. Yeah. Not intentionally, but it happens, right? I take a mask off when I shouldn't. I want to give my girlfriend a peck on the cheek when I shouldn't. Those things continue to happen, despite not my wife. I mean, I'm saying if I was a student, Mr. Rossway, as if I were a student, that we know those things are. Those things are in all likelihood going to continue to happen. We have to educate from day one. First, we have to educate all students on how to be an online learner, because at any point, any of you are going to be an online learner during the course of this school year. We all know that everybody at some point is likely going to be an online. If I get sick 4 to 6 times a year, I want you to stay home 5, 6, 7, 8 days. Or 10 days if they're, or 14 days if they're COVID-like symptoms. We want you to be an online learner in that piece. But outside of training everybody to be an online learner day one, we also have to go back and re-educate, because again, the stories that I'm hearing is This is how our students react. They're not used to that type of controlled environment. I think our elementary students, I'm going to just make an assumption, probably more so because they are used to coming in day one. This is how we line up. This is how we do things. High school kids have that freedom, right? I just come in and kind of do what I want. So there will be a process of retraining students. This is what we have to do. And let me also say this, we go ahead and approve this plan and try to make that 80% or whatever our community happy by offering face-to-face. They have to understand that if they don't comply, they're jeopardizing that for themselves. They wanted to come back face-to-face. If they're not willing to work with us, they're jeopardizing that for themselves and for everybody around them. And that has to be a strong message that we get out. We are also still evaluating to seek parent permission to conduct temperature checks before entering school. So you want to opt into school, we might be checking your temperature, sign a waiver if you want to choose that. So if we have 2 equal programs, we can force families into making that decision. We're going to check your temperature before you come in. You're over 100.4. I could turn you away at the door. So we haven't made that decision yet. We're still evaluating what that looks like, how we can do that and make that feasible. But that is something that I also wanted to throw in there.
But that will be an option and choice for the students to do. So it would not be something we could mandate or.
No, we could get them to sign the waiver to say, yes, if you're going to come face to face, you need to comply with this. Otherwise, you're going to have to be an online student. And here's the other piece. When we get in deeper part of the detail, and I know it's really confusing when you read the 18 or 19 page thing. And again, my plan, the overall plan is 3 times that. We're trying to condense this and make this easy for the community to understand. But as we go through that process, Mr. Rossway, like even a student that doesn't comply with wearing masks, if you don't comply, and you guys, maybe if you read some of the finer points, I can send you out for online learning. So we have a student shows up day 1, hey, Johnny, you need to wear your mask. And again, I quantified that as grades 3 through 12. I think we have to work a little bit closer with our K2 students. But if I'm in grades 3 through 12, I think there's going to be an understanding. I come to school, the mask is required, nose and mouth all day, except for those break times, lunch, outside. Our teachers are going to work in more time to get people mask breaks. I know how tough it is to wear a mask for 7 hours. We know it's going to be tough on students. But outside of those mask breaks, if you're going to, be in a classroom, you're going to be sitting in a desk 5-6 feet away from somebody else, that mask is going to have to be on. And for those students that don't comply, then we move them to the online education system. So those are things that we would certainly invoke as we go through this process and have the ability to do. Food service, nearly all elementary students will be served lunch in their classrooms. Food service staff will drop off bag box lunches, disposable utensils. Bothell students will be socially distanced using the cafeteria, boys and girls sports decks. High school, same thing, using the cafeteria, library, both boys and girls sports decks, or they're still evaluating additional lunch periods, maybe as many as 6 lunch periods to reduce numbers. And some of this will be available after we know how many kids we're going to have on August 19th, hopefully. Staggering student release times, both Bothell and the high school, to avoid long lines. Those types of things are all being put into our building level plans. So that's a snapshot.
I am a little concerned with, especially K2, K3 kids being scared to come to school. I mean, that, we're kind of forcing the masks on, and everybody's a little panicked, and they know there's something going on. So I'm hoping that doesn't negatively long-term impact their feelings of fear towards school. That is something. I was bused when I was little, and everybody around you at that time in the early 70s was freaked out over busing. And I know that did have some impacts on me as a child, getting on a bus, knowing you're going across town. Your parents weren't happy about it. So it will have some impacts. At
that point, I didn't see, have we done anything to bolster sort of just counseling and support services?
So that's additionally in my plan, the social emotional learning, everything that we're stepping up social emotional learning. I probably have about 2 or 3 pages in the bigger plan that just address social emotional learning. We're kicking off the year with some trauma-informed instruction. Every level is going to do an assessment on staff and students right away when they come back to school. So those things absolutely are part of the plan.
Whoever is down and up, you know, is that gonna cause problems? Identify who's going to the isolation. I mean, if I have allergies, and I cough 4 times in a class period, am I gonna have to go to isolation room because I'm coughing and sometimes?
That's going to ultimately be a staffing decision where our staff would be the person that sends them down, the school teacher, the instructional program aide, that makes that determination that sees something outside of the norm for that child. And yes, I think to answer your question in short, to be overly cautious, that's what the state recommends. That's what they need in every one of the buildings. That is one of those requirements, is that we actually have a sick room in each one of those buildings, and that's how that sick room is staffed. I agree with you, especially seeing somebody not only in a face mask that the kids are going to get used to, but now I'm gowned. We have gown to those people, clear face shield on those folks, taking down that information. But that there again, the communication that I want to make for families is to hopefully, if the child is, and it won't happen in all cases, we know, but if the child feels at all anything, we're going to try to encourage the parents to keep them home before they get to that point in school, to get sent there. Take online learning for this day or the next day or 3 or 4 days to get over that cough or whatever that symptom is before they come back.
But I have allergies all year
Yeah.
round,
Yeah.
so you would think most kids don't have it.
And that's where Dr. Pig, every kid's going to have 4 to 6 colds. And that's why it's so difficult to determine, is it a cold or is it a COVID-like symptom?
So I think, I don't know if this is really your question, but I agree with what you're saying. And I think it varies from an individual basis, right? So there are some teachers, I think, who are a little bit more heightened on seeing those cough symptoms during a regular flu season, and maybe send students that may have a sniffle or a runny nose down to get checked more than the next room. It might not be as consistent, right? I think it's all done by getting that individual level of comfort. So I think they're just going to have to, use. I don't know if that comes from administration. I don't know if we need to set that tone, but I think it just needs down for more temperature checks. Let's have that maybe conversation at the beginning of the year, and just have it as a realistic expectation to your students in your classroom, and say, look, a normal cough I'm not going to be worried about, but maybe there has to be some kind of an FYI. Yeah, you might be sent down for more temperature checks than in previous years or something. I don't know. But I agree, it could be, you don't have somebody trying to hold in a sneeze or a cough. Or,
Right. And my kids have allergies, and every once in a while they'll just kind of cough.
Sure.
And, now the joke is, oh, they have COVID, but
right.
So part of the educational piece that is also written into the plan is teaching kids how to appropriately cough and sneeze, right? I got to make sure I'm coughing, sneezing in my elbow. So it doesn't say that for every cough or sneeze that you're getting sent to the sick room based on that. There's actually posters and coaching techniques that we use under that hygiene phase to say, hey, you're going to cough into your elbow, you're going to sneeze into your elbow, and do some of those
But
things.
if I have allergies and I'm coughing and sneezing into my arm,
Right. Well, and another good point, and maybe that's something that, to your point, Jim, that we do a better job communicating with parents. Parents let us know, hey, my kid has allergies, they're having a cough. That two-way communication between the parent and the teacher is going to be vital, I think, at that point as well.
Right. Well, and another issue, and I know it's been brought up before, is that we don't have medical staff at every building. We don't have nurses at every building. So you're having non-medical people determine how they're feeling, and if it's COVID or not.
I would have to have a nurse in every classroom to make that determination. And again, what I raised that question, do we need to have a nurse in every room? A nurse doesn't know any more the symptoms between COVID and a cold than what an instructional program aide or secretary or somebody else that may have staff that. All they can do is take a temperature. We call parents. Parents come pick up the child. Either at that point, they get a doctor's note saying, hey, we don't have any of this, or they're going to end up quarantining for a certain amount of time.
We're gonna have a designated place where they can get tested, or places that we can send them to, or they go to the regular doctor.
Well, that's my other meeting. I just showed up there. I better turn that off. Northern has agreed to allow us to do that. Still, the health department recommends that you go see your family health doctor and go through those channels. But for those people that can't get into their family health doctor, don't have that as an option, talked to Dr. Kirkpatrick last week, and yes, they agreed that they would take that on. They are also very limited, I will say this, as it was discussed. Another meeting. I don't know how to turn that off. Great meeting.
Well, I mean, that's another thing too, who's paying for the testing, because most health insurance are not paying for testing unless you have symptoms.
And so if we have a concern and we need to send somebody over to Northern, then I think the district is going to have to take on that responsibility if we have that fear. And this will be one of those years where we may have some at-risk and some other students that certainly can't afford it, same as the technology, right? We've supplied houses with Wi-Fi capable devices because they weren't able to afford it. And if we were all online, we would have to do that again for some families as well. So I don't know how to turn that off.
Okay, we gotta move it because you're in a little bit.
Computer's off, the whole thing.
I can turn it off.
Over the knee.
So Mr. Saunders talking about testing, and I know that the board received a letter from a parent, Rachel Bannon Hunter, and she had asked about testing on a daily basis. And I know that we've acknowledged a lot of why we can do that, and we do have that opportunity with Northern, but I'm assuming are there legal processes for?
We can't legally require a health screen for a student to enter school. Again, I think we can get them to sign off on that temperature check, but again, even with the testing, Northern's going to see it, we're going to see it, we see it in society. Testing on what day means what. If we're not committed, like we see in some of this professional athletic teams, from testing every day, you have a snapshot of a window. I probably shouldn't say this because I'm on I better not say it because I'm on here. I do know.
You already talked about your girlfriend.
I do know of institutions that are testing. Well, and again, some of even our medical folks in the community that are testing, and meanwhile the person's working, and I get the result back 3 or 4 days later. What good does it do if I'm allowing somebody to continue on waiting for those results to come back? It would almost have to be, you can't come until we see a negative test, and then for how long?
I'm afraid it'll get people overconfident, because we're testing everybody in Northern. I think my test, it was negative, but I'm concerned people are gonna get those negative tests.
And I get it. I
I
really do, and I understand the potential safety that somebody reads into it, but if I test everybody the week before, even if I could mandate it, which I can't, but even if I tested everybody the week before school, the week of August 31st, and now I go out and do whatever I do on Labor Day weekend and I come back, I don't understand where that data is going to benefit us in that instance. And again, I'm not saying there's not instances where the data could benefit us, but in that instance, I don't know where the data benefits us.
So I'll just go back to something Ms. Conbenzi said earlier. Some kids are not online learners. They're just not. I mean, even at the college level, I teach online classes. Some kids do it very well. They're self-disciplined. They're into the material. They set time aside. They do very well with online. There's others that just don't. And so, going online, even, just saying that's what we do, there's going to be a certain percentage of kids that are completely left out this year. We do that, it's going to impact. So, again, there's some good parts about online learning. I feel like as an instructor, I can do a few more things I can't do in the classroom, but they're just those students who just aren't geared towards.
Well, I hear that every day. I experience that in my own family. I mean, I have one child that is excellent and very studious and can log in and do it. I had one that just didn't have the attention to log in and do that and participate. So we had a little bit of an ugly spring in my household because of that. Especially when I went back to middle school and said, hey, you guys not pushing out lessons? Oh, well, yeah, we just checked the teacher's web pages and everybody's pushing this stuff out. And I was like, oh, boy. So
Yeah.
I had my own little issue with that. But
Well, and I think that a lot of parents that are planning on sending their kids in person, that, you know, we have been talking to our students and been like, okay, you know, if you're gonna do this, this is what's expected of you so that you can continue to go in person. You know, we're trying out different masks to find out which one's more comfortable. You know, we're you know, talking about, well, don't touch it once it's on your face, and, you know, make sure you're washing your hands after doing stuff. You know, we're already prepping them for that so that they can continue in person. I mean, I know that I have 3 boys and they're just not online learners. It was a bad spring trying to get them to do that. And, you know, we've done tutoring for the whole time just so they could have some face-to-face and help them, you know, get on track.
And that's with a parent who is able to put in the time to do it and paying attention. So there's sometimes parents are too busy with 2 jobs or whatever else, or single parents, that would become even that much more difficult for them to be able to do. So it's a tough situation. It really is. This is, and I'm not even convinced that once we get a vaccine that how long that will take, you know, whether it's effective
Or if everyone takes
or if
it.
everybody takes the vaccine. So I mean, this could be another 6 months to a year type of an experiment that we're going through.
Well, I mean, this is never, it's never gonna go away. It's probably never gonna be completely eradicated. It's either gonna mutate or do something else. I mean, it's just gonna be something that it's gonna be here.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of figure out how to, you know, keep it from spreading into the community and things like that. And I think that we have a fairly comprehensive idea of what we need to try to do to eliminate as much as we can. I mean, we know that we're gonna have cases. It's just inevitable. I mean, I think they said that the spread in the UP for positive cases, it's like, what, 1.3%. So if we have 100 people, at least one person is gonna be positive. If we have a school of 1,000, like the high school or Bothwell, we could have 13 kids starting out the beginning of the year that are positive. That's just reality.
It is, yeah.
So we just have to try to do the best we can to prevent the spread so that we're not going from 13 maybe starting the year to, you know, all 1,000 kids are infected.
Well, that's the thing that I still go back to the gravity of the potential consequences and the fact that those 13 kids, and then there could be another 26 that we don't even know about. And by virtue of putting them back into the schools, we now have 175 or 2,000 in a couple of months because we didn't have the opportunity to consider an all online option. I mean, I recognize that there are challenges to all online, and at the same time, that is the way of the world. And to a certain degree, our kids need to learn online. That's a fact. So I'm a little disappointed still that, given the grave consequences that could come from this, we haven't been presented with a fully considered online only option as a district. So it becomes a matter of, as a board member, we now have to make a decision to either support this or not. We don't have an either support this or talk about something else. So that's not to take, I absolutely want to say that I am in full support of all the hard work that went into this. Is a very challenging thing to try and balance children's safety with children's mental health, with costs and liability. There's a lot that goes into it.
Well, even if we did all online though, let's say, that does not mean that our kids won't be exposed to COVID because they're online, because they're only in front of a computer for X amount of hours during the day. That does not mean that they're just sitting in their room the whole time. They could be going out, going for bike rides, they could be doing whatever. and
Have
they
you been
could
to the
still be
beach lately?
exposed. Well, yes, I mean, there's thousands of ways that they could be exposed.
I understand, we just haven't been given that option to consider, nor have we been given a medical opinion of that option. We've not been given,
Well, no, I
The
think
data
a lot of the
look-
data
don't
that
have
is
an
out there though,
option to
is that online learning is not necessarily the way to go. That I think there's been a few studies out there that face-to-face is more beneficial for the students than the potential risk of.
well, believe me, I believe in the value of face-to-face, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that's why we know that face-to-face is the most beneficial mode of education for our students. So I think that's why we haven't focused on all online, because we know that the best way to go is face-to-face.
Yeah, and I think the stipend we're giving is kind of the indication that we know at some point we may end up having to go online, or we at least have to have an effective online tool for kids to have. So I don't think we're saying that online isn't ever going to be an option, because let's face it.
We're chasing, I feel like we're shaking the dice,
Yeah.
and we're likely to be all online anyway. And so we're gonna spend a period of time shaking the dice without having considered the alternative.
I think the majority of people, again, in our community are,
Absolutely understand that.
well, I think that's why we have gone to, to this method though. I don't understand what the exercise would do, or what you would want to have compared. I guess maybe you could start there.
Well, I mean, so if we had gone through an exercise of what would it look like if we did an all online, maybe an all online with some face-to-face opportunity for socialization in a COVID-safe way and very minimal ways in the gymnasium where there's plenty of ventilation. There are scenarios we could have evaluated that could be here on the table today, that could have cost assumptions associated, that could have risk mitigation assumptions associated. It could be a full comparison. Right now, we don't have that, and I don't feel comfortable that we have anything to evaluate other than say yes or say no.
I will say I feel comfortable in the fact that our society is not yet equipped to embrace a full online learning. Maybe we get there in 10 years, 20 years. I'm not sure what that timetable looks like or would have any guess, but there are just too many people who have to go to work face-to-face, that have continued to work face-to-face.
Absolutely, that's a challenge. I appreciate that challenge from all over the state. That challenge is the case, and there are districts going all online. We just haven't considered it.
I'm assuming, Mr. Saunders, if I were just to ask you that cost, I mean, you may not have a specific cost, but there's a lot of costs we suddenly do not have in holding 100% online, correct? In the way of busing, maintaining buildings, janitors, et cetera. So would it be safe to say that if we did it and are going to a full-time online, that there's probably going to be some cost benefits?
I wouldn't say cost benefits. Remember, we're financed by sales tax. So if we have fewer people with jobs in the communities, we'll have fewer dollars coming into K-12 too. So there is these, we don't operate in a vacuum. So when we do something, it's going to have spin-off effect. So even while we would be saving money here, that'd be less money. And I mean, one problem we have as a state or as a country now is people aren't spending, they're not working. It's having impacts on state, local budgets significantly. So
and our savings would be a direct result of laying off employees.
So it really becomes a catch-22 down the road when you're looking at that. It's going to be less revenue for state and local communities at that point as well. So
And they have done studies where, or there's been articles that I've read where they said that you're either a parent or you're at home or you have kids. Either you go to work and do your job, or you stay home with the kids. There's really no in between.
There's not a lot of daycare options in this region.
No,
there's been a study on that was published not that long ago. Now that daycare appears extremely expensive.
Right, well, and it's unfortunate that our system is set up that education is, you know, the social emotional part for
Everything.
kids. And, you know, that our society relies so heavily on education to be able to go out to work or to be able to do some of the stuff or have their kids get food. I mean, it's unfortunate that that's just the way that our education system is set up. But I mean, that's not gonna change overnight.
It's not.
And I
But in
really,
September, when we are forced to do it anyway, if we are, those problems will still exist. And so, again, my point is not that this is the wrong decision. My point is that I haven't been empowered to make that decision because I don't have the alternative to say, hey, look, all these train wreck problems that we might have and all these questions that we don't have answers to and how we're gonna handle it would go away potentially if we chose this option. A whole host of other problems would be made because like you said, there's a lot of kids that are not really well cut out for online learning or haven't adapted to that. We would have to find solutions for those kids, just like we've had to find solutions anyway to have hybrid. So my point is that I just wish we'd had that option to discuss with some substance.
and again, I think that's just because we didn't feel that that was the way that the community and everyone wanted to go. And if you wanted to choose all online, you could, you're still having that option, just that we're not forcing everyone to suddenly become online learners.
We already have some, 200 and some kids that are already gonna be all online. Because that's the way their parents have chosen it.
Sure.
But even that number is gonna change. And the only thing
It'll
that,
probably go up.
and I get what your point is, the only thing there isn't data for the multiple what ifs would take an unbelievable amount of time to do on top of what they've already been doing. And maybe that answer will be available in, you know, in weeks to come, but not right now. And this is what we have right now, and what we have is several options above and beyond what the state's doing. This is our best shot right now, and it can be, there could be more when more data is available. A lot of what ifs. There's way too many what ifs.
Right, there's a major difference
There's
between
there's a myriad
statistics
of what ifs,
and hypotheticals.
and to deal with them all at one time before we get there. I mean, time is already, a lot of what ifs have been covered by what we have here. And, I get where you're going with that, because we don't know exactly what that will be though. I don't, so I understand your frustration, but for me, it's not gonna stand in the way of me being able to say, okay, well, we've gotta move ahead. We can't stall out and wait for more information because there's parents that are just clamoring
Yeah,
for
I
us
hear
to
that
make
quite
a
a bit. They
decision.
want us to make good decisions.
Yeah,
And I
this-
mean, we're
this
only,
year-
we're about 3 weeks away from starting school. And-
Oh, that's the other difficult part, right, is that we get
Well,
this
yeah,
3
exactly.
weeks before starting school and it's.
And none of it's easy.
These are all
This
fair-
year
these are all
is
fair
trial and
points.
error,
I get it.
period. Face-to-face instruction this year is gonna be trial and error. And if we went online only, for the rest of the year, that's gonna be trial and error as well. Then we look back and we see, okay, what worked well, what didn't work well, let's fix that for going forward. Again, we
Well, I
can,
guess part of it for me is that if we had that option, and we did choose to go that direction, it would force us into that model so that as we get shut down and reopened and shut down and reopened, as is the likelihood, we've already got the online down, and we've ironed out the kinks. And I'm not arguing that we should have online. I'm arguing that I don't have the ability to compare the two.
Yep.
I don't have the ability to look at what are the options. So that's,
I'm not struggling with that.
So, and I know parents would love us to be able to say 100% your kids are gonna be safe to go to school. And that, you know, sometimes we feel like we are, you know, rolling the dice, gambling with people's lives, because we just don't know what could possibly happen. You know, but that's with anything though. You could walk outside and get hit by
We
a
don't know
car.
when we put them on the school bus that
Right.
something wouldn't happen. You know,
I mean,
something regular.
there's so many unknowns, and that's, you know, the great frustration with this is that we don't know what's gonna be the best option. And, I'm sure just like all of you, you've been reading articles, you've been talking to parents, you've been, researching and doing all this stuff, and we still don't know. We have so much information to sort through, but we just don't know what the best path is. So we have a plan that we think is our best bet.
So we also do know that we're dealing with a virus, not an automobile accident, and we do know something about the behavior of viruses and about the seasonal nature of them.
But we don't know about this virus,
density of
because it changes
people
week
being
to
in
week.
schools and about the less amount of sunlight in the fall.
Yeah,
So
we
do
won't
know that
probably
there are.
know a lot of this on this virus for 2 years after they've got a vaccine, on long-term impacts on lungs. Everything, is still, we're, first they said, well, you don't really need a mask. Now they're saying you need a mask. Saying, well, it didn't hit kids at all. Well, now it's hitting some kids. This is still a learning process, even for those who are dealing with it at the medical level, to be able to say where we're at and what's going on. So I think we just take our best information and make a decision on it. If you're not comfortable with it, you can vote against it.
No, they're all fair points, and it's not meant to be a debate. I'm just trying to, share my
I
perspective.
really appreciate the work that Bill's done, and I know.
Absolutely.
Keith, I
Me
think
too.
we've all said this when, we're looking for guidance from, we have the State Board of Education, we have the Superintendent of Education. I'm not sure how much feedback we're really getting and guidance from them. So, Bill's had to do what he's had to do. Well, there's 100 different opinions out there and 100 different experts about what we should do. So I'm actually quite amazed at the detail of this and at least the thought and the discussion that went into this. And are there some blanks to be filled in? Absolutely. And maybe we can get some of that data that Mr. Glendon is asking about as maybe that online may become more of a reality, because that would escalate that discussion.
Well, from this point forward, obviously, we're going to have an ongoing online academy probably till the end of time. And I think that some parents are going to find through this pandemic that online learning fits them best. And we've already been losing some students at a very small percentage, 14, 15 students a year to online. We haven't been losing enough to really support fully funding our own online academy. But I do believe coming out of this and the social implications that are coming from the lack of interaction, we're wearing masks, we're not shaking hands anymore, and all those things are going to change human behavior. And I think that we are going to see a lot more human behavior. And I think that's part of this whole stipend thing. Our teachers are going to help us build this online academy that we're going to be able to use from now until. And so now we have, at least for a number of years, a traditional model of education. We have an alternative high school, an alternative model of education, and we're going to have an online option for students. And we're going to continue to get varied and incorporate other things into that as we move forward. I respect 100% where Mr. Glennon's coming from. We had this conversation the other day. And I find it hard, and again, I haven't slept a lot in tough decisions of what do I bring to the board and how do I recommend. I don't feel comfortable saying to 80% of our parents that I am not going to work as hard as I can to find a face-to-face way if that's what you're asking me to provide you. And right now, that's my role, is to try to provide that level of education that my parents are asking for, our parents are asking for. At the same time, those parents have to understand and know, and Kristen's alluded to it as a parent, I know it as a parent, Jim knows it as a parent, Keith probably knows it as a parent. There's an inherent risk of sending your child to school, and every family is sitting down to make that determination. We've provided options to those families moving forward. But I also don't feel comfortable in coming up with a model at this point in time that might put 100, 150 people, MAPS employees out of work. I'm adding to the crisis if I'm putting those people out of work at this point as well. So there's a lot of factors that come into it. I don't also want us to turn around and make a decision today, and I respect where he's coming from. I would be real leery if we had a vote that said, I'm going to be 100% online. And to Dr. Cherry's point, how many kids am I going to lose? And will I ever get those kids back? And what's the long-term financial implications on our district if we lose 400 or 500 kids that maybe never come back.
Well, likewise, how many might we get from Gwynn and Medani, Lewis County and all?
But they're all still doing an online option and a face-to-face option. So those families already have that option in those communities as well. Anyway, I appreciate the board weighing in. And again, like I said, this is whatever we do, this is going to be a working situation, something that we continue to monitor and update daily as we go through this process.
Okay, do we have anything under other your report?
No.
Thank you. No comment.
Today was my first day of coffee for wellness. So, is that an other? Collagen, MCT, Himalayan sea salt, Manuka honey.
Add a little yak butter, that makes it total fruit coffee.
That's what I was gonna say.
Manuka honey. So, I'm off the cream.
Yeah, I've noticed a higher level.
Did you notice a higher level of thinking, understanding here today? I mean,
We do have someone waiting.
Okay, so that public comment, would it be on an agenda item?
That's next.
It is next, yeah, you were asked one of them.
is that back through my Zoom then, Linda?
Back through your Zoom.
I think you go back and figure link, Bill.
Okay, then
How many do we have in that queue?
Just one.
Just one?
Okay. Keep the time, yeah, keep time.
And our audio will be coming from our.
Maybe just several people, or I can't. No, I can't hear anything. Just several people, or I can't. No, I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us out there?
Charlie has left.
Sorry about that.
Want to ask Ellie if we should stay in this mode or if we should go back?
Can you hear us, Ellie?
Somebody contact Charlie.
Yep, I can hear you.
We stay in this mode now?
Maybe just give them a few minutes to see if they join.
Do you have comments, Ellie?
Yeah, go ahead, you got 5 minutes, Ellie, go ahead.
Ellie does
I don't have
an
any
awesome
comments.
job. Ellie does an awesome job, by the way.
Yes.
He does,
I don't have any comments. Do we want to move on? If we come back, stop and go back?
Unless they're gonna call back right away, I mean, they can always, but I don't know whether we like public comment before we take action on this, I don't wanna be criticized.
Well, we could do the Neola policy, because that's not.
Yeah, let's move on to the old one.
Okay, I'm gonna mute these again then. And Mr. Saunders, I'm gonna bring the camera mics back up.
Do I need to mute me again?
All right.
Is there some way to let Charlie know that he's, no?
He would have to connect there.
Do you even know if it was really Charlie?
Does anybody know Charlie?
Could have just been Russian actors, It was probably Russia trying to influence the vote.
I noticed you left the room when Charlie Hill came.
We've never been seen in the same room.
All right, we're gonna move on to item 6 then, and we're gonna still keep the public comment portion open if they do connect with us.
Charlie's back.
So,
Charlie's right.
Charlie's back.
Can you hear us, Charlie?
Not yet. Eric's gotta do his magic. Here we go.
Charlie, can you hear us? I'm unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Charlie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm unmuted.
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear us, Charlie?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you now.
go ahead.
Okay, this is Lisa though. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lisa though.
Are there two different machines, Charlie, in your room that are?
It's Lisa Rowe, I think she said, right?
If,
There we go.
we can't have, gotta make sure we don't have multiple.
Lisa Rowe.
In a room speaking, we'll get feedback, I think. Can't have, gotta make sure we don't have multiple.
Lisa Rowe.
In a room
Hi.
Can see you. Hello.
So for some reason it's under my husband's name. I'm Lisa Colwell. I don't know if you can hear me.
Go ahead, Lisa. We're ready for your public comment.
Okay, well, one, I have a question about when we might hear from Bothwell regarding new students. I have a 6th grader who's entering, and he's never been to the school, locker sign, just everything regarding him starting school. When we might hear something about that.
We're hoping to release information about school after the board takes action today on our 3 different learning plans. After that, we will release those learning plans to the public, and then you'll get a follow-up correspondence from the building principal.
Okay. Also, I work for MAPS, and it sounds like there's going to be, I've actually been, because of my seniority, switched to a new school, so I feel more out of the loop than I might normally. But it sounds like there's going to be all kinds of new protocol and possible training and things like that. Is there going to be a different start date for employees this school year?
Different start date for employees.
Training, and it sounds like she's inquiring as to giving the extended training and things.
Yeah, the staff comes back August 31st, I believe.
Okay. And okay, I have another question. I had, let's see how I want to say this. I have a son who is an all-A student in math, and because of his NWE score, he is not allowed to take algebra in 8th grade because there isn't room for him. So now that we have an online option, will he be able to take that class?
That's a great question. I'd have to direct that to Mr. Riegel, but I don't see why you wouldn't be able to take that class.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry it was so difficult to get you on. We appreciate you calling in. Just so you know, I should say this for the community. I am going to have a community town hall next Tuesday from 4 to 5 to help further answer questions that people have.
Okay,
And
great.
we'll have a panel of our principals and everybody on at that time as well. So thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Okay, item 6A.
I think Eric will have to, will Eric have to come in and shift us all around again? No, he's gonna come back.
This is really to cover just policy so that expected when wearing and there's a few check marks that we put on wear their own face coverings. Just fairly basic stuff, just kind of gives us a little bit more direction as to how they should be worn, who should be wearing them, consequences if you don't wear them, things like that.
Does this need to be approved before school starts?
We'll approve it at the next meeting.
The 24th.
This is just the first reading.
It's a policy, but it's also in our back to school plan that you're going to be voting on today as well. So
Right.
I didn't know if we need.
these are married together.
So there's no need to really act on it today. We're fine with the second reading.
No, just the first reading.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, any questions for Mrs. Conventi? We'll move on then. Item 6B, consider approval of the back to school plan presented by Mr. Saunders. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the back to school plan as presented.
I'll second.
Moved by Mrs. Conventi, supported by Mr. Randall. Discussion. I know we've had a lot, but certainly welcome to continue that discussion with any comments or perspective. Hearing none, we will call the question. All right, all those in favor, Linda? I just have to.
Okay, so
Roll call.
motion to approve the back to school plan was made. I'm gonna take a roll call vote. Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Sherry,
Yes.
James Hewitt,
Yes.
Keith Glendon,
No.
Okay, motion carries 5-1. Item 6C, this is a letter of agreement between the MEA regarding stipends, et cetera, during the pandemic and other activities. Bill, do you want to tee that up?
Well, again, to build this online academy and make this happen, to present the options that we're presenting to the community, our teachers are going to play a vital role in that. I can't help but say that the role that they would play in this is above and beyond what they would typically have found in their current bargaining agreement. This doesn't replace their bargaining agreement in any way, shape, or form. This is just a commitment on behalf of the district to say, you know, we know you're going to have to work not only with your face-to-face students, but with your online students, and that's going to require more time, energy, and commitment on their part. So.
I'll make a motion to approve the letter of agreement with MAEA and stipends for proctoring, teaching, communicating with students in MAPS via online academies.
Moved by Dr. Cherry, supported by
I may
Mr.
have to abstain from this one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good point. Before we call the question, so this is for all MAEA members. Has there been any discussion? Is there any other impact with other employees of ours that could possibly be included in this?
I don't know at this point that there would be any that would be exceeding what we already have currently in their contracts. Again, if you know, thinking about the big picture of all MAEA employees, and as we put out wellness and those types of things, we still want to monitor that wellness of our online students. So our counselors are going to have a caseload. Everybody is going to have a caseload of online students they're going to be responsible for. And to me, this is me acknowledging that. This is the board acknowledging that. Not only is Leslie Addison going to be working with her students face-to-face throughout the day that have certain intense needs, but she's going to be spending some more time outside of that to have two-way communication, Zoom and other things with those students that need her supports at home. And so that's something that is, I think, unprecedented for us at this point. I think moving past this year, we would get to a point where we may have our own strictly online teaching teachers academy folks that deal with online students as we move forward. But in this year, to combine that, because so many parents are really wanting that connection with my assigned classroom teacher, because I'm not sure when I'm going to be there, when I'm going to be out. So I want to be, you know, Mindy Longton's in her class at this point in time, where maybe in the future where they're electing to be more virtual, that they would, you know, accept more just dealing with a strictly online teacher. So anyway, I'm getting wordy, but to answer your question.
You were just making sure that.
Yeah.
Your
And again, so bus drivers, those types of things, I don't see anybody else at this point.
Okay, so nothing from MABA or anything either, correct?
Right, I don't see MABA having an online caseload at this point. They're probably happy that you know, their numbers will be a little bit lower, less you know, discipline and those types of things probably to handle, but they've been putting in a whole bunch of time to make all this happen. So in central, people really don't understand the extent and length that we've gone to this summer to try to plan and make these things happen. So everybody has pitched in tremendously.
So we only have one conflict to worry about, correct? Is what we're getting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have motion and support. Do we have any other discussion? If not, we will do a roll call vote. Linda?
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Kembenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Sherry,
Yes.
James Hewitt abstain, Keith Blendon,
Yes.
So motion passes 5-0 with one abstention, Mr. Hewitt. Item 7, board member comments. I'm just going to open it up to anybody who does have any comments.
I'll just close with a reiteration or a clarification that I have absolutely no doubt in our teachers, our staff, the committee, my fellow board members. You know, my vote on this matter today really stems back to, I think, you know, we maybe haven't done in this particular recommendation, haven't done full due diligence on what could still be a transformational learning opportunity to really embrace hybridizing our curriculum and our approach and maximizing the protection of our community. So not a no confidence vote, but I want to point that out and thank you, Bill, and all the teachers and staff members of the board that were involved in developing this and a lot of hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Blendon. Anybody else?
a lot of time has gone into it, and we actually are sort of out of time because this has to be approved and sent to the state on the 15th, which is 3 days away.
I mean, this is a living document.
Exactly. But this is, again, as far as I'm concerned, the best shot that, I mean, we've gone above and beyond what the state is actually asking us to do. And I think we're prepared for as much as we can be prepared for it. It's completely, talking about a wild card. Anyway, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I've definitely been agonizing over this for quite a while, you know, what to do not only for my own family, but for the rest of our students and teachers and everybody. I mean, we're not taking this decision lightly at all. And, I do worry about what could possibly happen. And you read online and like, we can't bring back a dead person. Well, we realize that, and we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we're as safe as we possibly can for our school community and the communities at large. And I think that, we're giving it our best effort. And, yes, we are agonizing over this. And I think that we're doing the best that we can with what we know and what we're given.
Yeah, I think just my final comment on that too. I agree that I think there is an opportunity, and we'll see more things as we've already seen society start to look at things differently and take different approaches to all our formal previous methods. Again, I think it just simply comes down to at this point that even if we had that comparison, I think the vote would have still gone the same way of an online versus a face-to-face return with online options for those who want it. So again, I understand where you're coming from, but again, at the same time, I don't think it would have changed the vote because, again, at least it's UP-wide, not just our Marquette community. It's being shown from our constituents, if you want to use that term, that they do want the face-to-face instruction. So, I mean, we could do that comparison and revisit that and look at different options moving forward. But right now, for this year, again, I don't know if that exercise would have, other than having a comparison, I don't think it would have changed the vote as to what we're going to do for the fall. But
Neither of us can know what it would have done, but
Nope.
good points. Good points.
Thank Mr. Hammerstrom and Ellie for the work they did. This came off as seamless as possible, so it's
Amazing.
nice to see everybody face to face again.
I made my comments. Clearly, one size does not fit all when we have such a unique school district with over 3,000 students and parents. And I go back to our, I believe it's our mission statement or vision, but it's about providing a safe learning environment. And I think we're doing that. We can go into a lengthy discussion about, well, define safe. Well, the thing is we need, I believe we have to provide that positive learning environment. And, during these unprecedented times, I've been really so impressed by Mr. Saunders and the enormous amount of work he's had while we've had other issues that we've been facing over the past year as well. So for, Bill and Mrs. Berry and really the entire staff, I think we're all on the same page with this and we want to fulfill that. And I wish there was just a black and white answer. Make it a lot easier. So those are my comments. Item 9, announcements and other meetings. Our next meeting will be the August 24th, regular board meeting electronically.
Will we be here again?
Yes.
We will be here.
So electronic is for the public.
It is still considered an electronic meeting.
Okay.
Item 10, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sport.
Moved by Mr. Randall, supported by Dr. Cherry. Roll call vote.
Rich Rosley?
Yes.
James Randall?
Yes.
Kristen Kempenzi?
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry?
Yes.
James Hewitt?
yes.
Keith Blendon?
Yes.
Okay. And before we adjourn, because I'm in a higher seat, I just would like to hit the gavel and walk away. And please, everybody rise until I left the room.
Yeah, well.
The board's